Hi, everyone. It is so exciting to see you all tonight on this beautiful weather, and we have two outstanding authors to introduce you to. I am broadcasting from what is now known as Toronto, Canada, and I want to acknowledge that it's the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. This Zoom today, like all of my work with monarchs, is my effort to help restore whatever land I have influence over to the natural way it existed when the settlers arrived. And before I introduce our guests, I want to introduce the other authors that are here. So, Ona, put your volume on, and if you've got your book, hold it up and tell us what it is.
Oh, I haven't got my book. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, I haven't got my book actually here with me, but it's called The Paper Butterfly and it's literally just been published a couple of weeks ago. It's a children's book, but it's for anybody that loves nature.
Well, I just feel your excitement. It's isn't it Monika and Wendy just like practically like giving birth. So you can put your hand down. Thank you for that. And
Okay.
now I will introduce our authors of the night. Wendy Williams is an award-winning journalist and the New York Times best-selling author of The Language of Butterflies. She interviewed an impressive list of monarch butterfly authorities, including Dr. David James, Dr. Anurag Agrawal, Dr. Lincoln Brower, Dr. Karen Oberhauser, Elizabeth Howard, founder of Journey North, Dr. Chip Taylor, Jeff Glassberg of North American Butterfly Association. Would you believe there are 194 endnotes in this 200-page book? So if you haven't read it yet, you are sure to learn something new about the world's favorite insects. Okay, here's our first test. Have you read Wendy's book? Go to the reactions. Raise your hand if you've read it. Okay, we have a few. Good. I'm going to lower my head. And we have Monika Maekle, master gardener and the well-known blogger of Texas Butterfly Ranch. She's the founder of the highly successful Monarch Butterfly and Pollinator Festival in San Antonio. For 14 years, Monika has been keeping us abreast of the latest in monarch events, controversies, and research, all the while collecting information for her new 200-page book, The Monarch Butterfly Migration, Its Rise and Fall. She combines scientific research with field trips to Monarch Watch, Monsanto, and the overwintering sites in California and Mexico. She has interviewed hundreds of monarch aficionados, including in-person visits with the leading monarch scientists and conversation with our boots-on-the-ground citizen scientists. Let's start with you, Monika. 24 years ago, you had a life-altering experience near your retreat property in Texas. Can you tell us about it?
It was quite a day. I had the previous year in 2004, I had been invited to a friend's ranch to do this thing I'd never heard of. She said, "Do you want to come take some monarch butterflies?" I'm like, "What?" And so my husband and I and another couple drove to Menard, which is about a 40-minute drive from where we have our place on the Llano River in the Texas Hill Country. And we arrived at like 5 o'clock. And my friend Jenny Singleton, who's kind of my monarch butterfly mentor, she every year she has like a weekend where she invites people to come and tag monarch butterflies, and like everybody was sitting out. There was a potluck, there was ice chest with beer, and I walked in and I was like, "So where's all the butterflies?" She just wait. So she got everybody set up, and we had butterfly nets with these 12-foot long PVC pipes where the butterfly nets were stuck inside the pipes so that you could reach way up into these trees that were down in the Sabanal River. And right as the sun was setting down, hundreds and hundreds of these monarch butterflies just dropped from the sky and started roosting in the trees, and everybody started the taller, stronger guys were swinging these 12-foot long poles, and the rest of us were putting them in ice chests because we had so many we couldn't tag them quickly enough. And Jenny showed me how to tag them, and it was just like this incredible, monumental, life-changing experience for me. Where I was like, "What? How did I not know about this?" So I left there. My husband and I left there, and the next day, I was just like, I couldn't stop thinking about the monarch butterflies. I couldn't believe that I didn't know about it because I kind of felt like I'm a nature nerd and I know a lot of things, but I'd never even heard of this. So I started doing all this research on it. And then the following year, after having, read a lot about it, I ordered tags for Monarch Watch, and I went to our place. And our place on the Llano has a very similar ecosystem setup to the place that we were where we tagged them that first time. We have a limestone escarpment in the back, which kind of holds the heat when the sun sets. We have a grove of pecan trees. We've got the Llano River. We've got all kinds of nectar sources. At that time of year in Texas, there's very few places where flowers are blooming except along rivers and streams because it's, a long hot summer and everything's dried up. So the monarchs have everything they need. And I got on my kayak and, got in the put-in spot, got out at this one spot, and I stepped out of the kayak and I looked up, and it was just this eruption of monarch butterflies just flittering all over the place. And I was like, I can't believe this. And I started tagging them, and it was my first time to tag them on our property. And every year since then, I go back in October, which is 2 weeks ago. My birthday is October 13th, and I always have Monica's Monarch birthday party. It was not a great year this year, but it changed me. And when I went to work that week, that Monday when I came back, I just could not stop thinking about it. And I ended up, sort of, devoting myself to that as like in my spare time when I wasn't working. I was reading about it, researching it, writing about it. And where I worked, the company that I worked at, I was assigned to do this new thing called new media. I was at a wire service called Business Wire. And so I was assigned the task of starting the company blog. And I thought, I'm going to just start another blog on the side and I'll make it about butterflies. And, so what, I can do experiments. And if I screw up, no big deal. And that's when I started the Texas Butterfly Ranch. So that's kind of how it happened. And I like to say, like so many great things in life, it wasn't something I planned. It was just one of those things that happened.
And your story is like so many of ours, where we have one up close and personal experience with an adult butterfly or a caterpillar, and before you know it, we're standing on every rooftop telling other people how fantastic it is.
It's true. It's true. And like where we are on the Llano, it's a very shallow river and it's very slippery. And like I had to kind of teach myself to not, run across the slippery rocks chasing a butterfly with my net because I was getting to the point where I don't want to slip and fall out of here. There's not a hospital for 30 miles. So I stopped doing that because it was too dangerous. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to run after the butterflies. I'm only going to do it from the kayak or when I'm on land, but I'm not going to run across the river. So
did you ever actually have an accident?
I did. I mean, I've slipped and fallen many, many times, and I still do. But like I told myself to not chase because when you're chasing, you're looking at the butterflies. You're not looking where you're stepping. And where we are, it's very irregular. Like it'll be 2 feet deep, it'll be 6 inches deep, and it'll be 5 feet deep, and you'll just fall into a hole. So
okay, well, that's a good word to the wise. Next to you, Wendy. Wendy, you've written a lot of books and New York Times best-selling books on book on horses. You've written about cancer patients, bike paths, politics, squids. Why did you choose butterflies as your next project? Unmute. And Monika, you can mute just in case.
all right.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Great. The book I had written previously was a book about horses. Why do we have horses in our lives? So I was thinking, what can I write about that's at the opposite end of the spectrum? And I came up with butterflies. So I asked myself the same question, why do we have butterflies in our lives? And why do people love them so much? What goes on in the human mind when we look at butterflies? So I did what I always do, just started asking a lot of scientists questions, and
the book proceeded from there.
Well, you've written a lot of books, and I saw a recent article that you wrote about the kind of the ups and downs and the challenges in writing. So I'm going to read
Oh,
this for everybody.
my whiny little post on Facebook. Yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah.
I'm going to read some of it. This is how Wendy tackles writing a single chapter. Okay, the book is 200 pages, and she's written a lot of books, but this is how she was tackling a single chapter. This is what she said. First, I needed to read. Then I needed to read. After that, I needed to read. I needed to find out about the meaning of wine 1,000 years ago. I needed to find out why someone would care about a butternut. Second, I needed to organize my notes. Oh my God, what a task. Third, I needed to write. Every time I come to a complex question in the chapter, I need to think about what it is that I need to understand. Who can help me understand that? For example, I need to think about why sulfates in the atmosphere make the world cooler, but CO2 makes the world warmer. Fourth, I need to find ways to explain these things in words that readers will find helpful. Fifth, I needed to write. I've been writing this chapter for about a month now, and I'm halfway through the first draft. Wendy, do you have a love-hate relationship with writing, or how does it feel?
I actually, it's what I do. I mean, what would be the point of being alive if I weren't writing a book? So it's not really a hate. It's just I wrote that little thing on Facebook because I've been working on this book for 2.5 years, and people keep saying, "Where's your book?" Someone said to me in town, "Don't you think you better start showing us this book?" So they don't have any idea what I'm doing here, and I'm just trying to explain this is what one chapter takes. It's 3 months altogether, and that'll just be having the first draft. So it takes a long time. When you're a science journalist, you have to be sure you have your information correct. You have to find other people that'll say, yes, that's what I meant, or you need to change that, or you need to change that. It's not anything that goes quickly. And if you don't want to do it, maybe you should just watch TV or something. But it can be very tedious, but I do like it. I mean, what I like is at the end, when I look at the chapter and say, oh, I didn't know that's what this chapter was going to be about. I didn't know that I was going to learn about butternuts in this chapter, you know. And you reminded me too, I forgot to put that in the chapter. I'll have to go back and fix that tomorrow. But I don't know what I'm going to come across when I do a chapter, and that's really intriguing.
Well, that's very cool. So that as you get into these things, they kind of take on a life of their own. I was
Oh,
very
they do.
lucky with my second book because it was during the pandemic and I had nothing else to do. So, and I don't have to make a living doing it. So I was very happy to have a project, a hobby for my second book, which very few people know about. Monika, tell us about your writing process. Unmute, please.
I've been a journalist for much of my life, and I've been married to a journalist. And my husband and I started a local news website. So writing and reporting has always just kind of been something I've always done. And I've just always loved to write. Like when I was a kid, I would write, just family histories and, the story of my father or whatever. So for me, it's almost like therapeutic. It's the way I process what I learn. And when I write something, somehow it sticks with me better, like I remember it better. And so, yeah, I don't know. I don't find it as arduous. Like if I have a deadline, I'm going to sit down and like do it. I find the publication process much more challenging. I mean, it took me 7 years to get this book done, the Monarch book. And I mean, I was at the point where it's like, look, if I can't get this published, uh, I'm going to, I'm going to self-publish it. But as it turned out, I had a great editor who found me online. It was like this crazy coincidence where I actually won a writing contest finalist designation at the Texas Writers Conference. And I didn't realize that they posted the entries online. And then Andrew Brzezinskis, the acquisitions editor for the University of Oklahoma Press, just chanced upon this entry online, and he reached out to me in an email after I'd been going back and forth with different editors. And I had an agent for a while. He had COVID. I was just like, no matter what I did, I just couldn't get this book to the finish line. And he wrote me an email and said, hey, I was going down the bunny trail on the internet and I ran across your book chapter, and I really like what you do. Would you like to talk about your book? And I was like, yeah. So anyway, it happened, and I'm very grateful, and they've been an incredibly supportive press. So that's how it worked for me.
Yeah, a supportive press. Well, that really helps. 'Cause you made a name for yourself already. So yeah, they knew you. Wendy, question for you. You took a deep dive into the history of the discovery of the monarch's overwintering sites in Mexico. Can you share some of the details that fascinated you the most?
Oh, you mean about how they found the overwintering site? It was just, it was really serendipity. It was an accident that they found it. Although what happened was everybody up here knew the butterflies flew south, but they didn't know where they went. Of course, the people who lived in Mexico knew exactly where they went because they had a festival just about this time of year, every year, celebrating the return of the butterflies. For them, the return of the butterflies was the return of the souls of their ancestors. It's very beautiful. So the two, it's hard for us to imagine in this day and age, but the two poles weren't communicating. They didn't know about each other. The scientists up here had no idea that there were people down in the mountains there that loved the butterflies. I don't think the people there knew there were scientists curious about this. So what happened was finally a couple went up into the mountains and hunted around, and they said they've decided that they'd found out where the butterflies do overwinter, and they contacted the researcher. So the researcher went, he was very excited. He went down there, he climbed the mountain, and it's not an easy mountain to climb, I can tell you, but you can ride horses if you don't like to climb the mountains. And he went up there and he sat down, and lo and behold, this is just amazing because the number of butterflies up there are countless. He was sitting there and a butterfly fell on the ground and it was a tagged butterfly. So, I mean, I don't know, was that the universe aligning or something? But that was actually proof that those were the same butterflies that flew all the way down from, in your case, sometimes Carroll, Canada, all the way down through the center of the country. And they go almost to Mexico City, then they make a sharp right turn and go up into the mountains and hang out in the trees there. And who would ever have thought that the little monarch butterflies could or would fly that far? But that's how science proved that was the same butterflies that we see here.
Well, it's not nothing short of a miracle because I've been to the overwintering grounds 3 times, and I have been on a hunt for a tagged butterfly, and I bet that some of you have too. Okay, you're searching high and low for a tagged butterfly. Has anybody here ever seen a tagged butterfly at the overwintering grounds, no matter how hard we search? No, that's what I thought. Monika, your book covers a similar story. Is your take on history similar to Wendy's?
There's a couple of things that I would disagree with, and I think this is a really important point, and one that I make in my book is that, I mean, the narratives, the common narratives shift a lot, and depending on who you talk to and where that person is, their own lens of the world really, shapes the way they see things. And, I like to say that the truth is a moving target. But as far as the quote discovery, and we always use, quotation marks when we use that word, the woman who was there, Catalina Trail, lives in Austin, Texas. She's still alive, and I've interviewed her multiple times, and we kind of broke her story on the Texas Butterfly Ranch. And she was with her husband, Kenneth Brugger, who Wendy referred to, who was a retired North American executive. They were both in Mexico City, and there was an ad placed in the Mexico City News, which is an English language weekly newspaper for Americans living in Mexico City. And it was like Fred Urquhart of Canada, who was, the guy that really pieced it all together over, from the 50s going forward and kind of invented monarch tagging. he had put an ad in the paper seeking research associates, which, is basically a community or citizen scientist. And Kenneth Brugger, who was probably in his 50s at the time, saw this ad and he was so excited. He's like, hey, and he told his girlfriend at the time, I think they weren't married yet. Hey, you want to go chase butterflies? Let's go do this. And so they did. She agreed to do it, and she said, just watch out for the Mexican government because they'll be after you. And so he had a motorcycle, and they had a Winnebago, and for 2 years they searched the mountains, and they knew that they were going to the mountains west of Mexico City. And then one day, while they were driving around, there was like a thunderstorm, and all these monarch butterflies fell onto the highway, and they knew that they were near. And Catalina, who was the only one who spoke Spanish, and she was from Morelia, which is very close to where the roosting sites are. Thanks to her, I mean, she was the one that got out of the car, and she had a picture. She had like samples of monarch butterflies that Fred Urquhart had sent and said, hey, have you seen these butterflies? And everybody they asked didn't respond. They didn't want to share the information, or they didn't know, or they knew and they didn't want to share it. So anyway, ultimately, they knew they were close, and they finally were very close. It was like, they're like 9 or 10,000 feet. It's very arduous climb. And Catalina had the brilliant idea of, getting with a local, and they hired a local with a horse to take them up to the mountaintop, and they found the butterflies. And Catalina had a camera with an old school remote, took this picture. The pictures are incredible. We have some of the photos on my website of literally just this wall of butterflies and, bursting through, just like on the cover of National Geographic. And then they found a couple of other places, and they went back to, I believe, Toluca, Mexico, and made a long distance phone call, which, back then was like probably $2 a minute. And they called Dr. Fred Urquhart and told him, we found the butterflies. And all of this is in the National Geographic article that came out a year and a half later. The cover has Catalina busting through a wall of butterflies. And I actually have it here somewhere, that August 1976 cover story. And I was shocked that when I heard all this, it's like, wow, they waited over a year to go down there. And then I realized, well, they were older, and it wasn't like today where you just jump on a plane and go somewhere. And actually, Catalina told me that she rented oxygen masks with, for them to go up the mountain because she was concerned about their health. And so they were carrying little oxygen masks where they could breathe better. And in the National Geographic article that announces this discovery, Fred Urquhart says at one point, I even thought, what if it's too much? Like, he thought he might die on this mountain. That's how hard it was for him to climb.
Excuse me, Monika, I thought I might die on that mountain.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have to say, I'm very suspicious of that story of the tagged butterfly. Come on. I mean, yeah, they say it was, I don't know if it's true or not, but I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was Elizabeth Howard's friend's butterfly too. Talk about coinky dink, right? Elizabeth Howard, the founder of Journey North. So anyway, it makes a great story, and stories are what sustain us. So, great idea.
It's a great story. Well, thank you for that. I think I'll take an audience question right now. So we have a question here from Mary Lou. And the question is, we'll start with Wendy. If you could do a second edition of your book, what would you change? Anything? What would you change?
Oh my God. It'd be a completely different book, because that's what I do. By the time I do the second version of the chapter that I'm working on now on the Vikings in America, it'll be completely different, because I go back and I look at it and I say, no, that's not what I meant. And by the time I'm done, I would fill it out more. I think I would fill it out more. And I think I would put in a lot more about the reactions of people to butterflies, because my editor, and I'm going to tell this as a secret, I can tell this now. Remember the story in the book where Amelia puts her hand up and the butterfly flies away, and David James gets new scientific data?
Yes, we're
Yes.
coming to that, actually.
Yes, that was amazing. Well, that was the beginning of the book. And I loved that story, that a 5-year-old could make science. She wouldn't let me start the book with it. So if I were going to make it my own book, I would go back and I would start with Amelia, because To me, what I love about everything, and Carol, I just love what you're doing. I think what you're doing is so fantastic. I told you we had a phone conversation, and I said, it's just great. What I love most about what I found out about all of this is how much people love butterflies. And when I decided to say the world's favorite insect, it really is the world's favorite insect all over the world. People are passionate about these insects. And I think it's thrilling, it's exciting that people like you and all these other people who they're just pitching in and they're doing the work and they're bringing back the butterfly. And everywhere, I would probably double the length of the book and spend a lot more time talking to a lot of people who've started new projects since I wrote this book. Why are you doing this? What's important to you about this? What do you think is special about the beauty of this insect as opposed to any other? What's going on in your brain? Because when so we had a great monarch year here in my little town of Mashpee on Cape Cod in my little yard, which since I started working on this, my husband pulled up all the grass and it's just weeds and flowers and all kinds of great stuff. And we had so many monarch butterflies. I think that's really exciting and that people see value in doing that. So I would emphasize that a lot more.
Okay, then, Audrey, are there any questions in the chat? All right, well, Audrey, just let me know if you do find any questions in the chat, and we'll go on to another question for Monika. There
I
is
don't see any.
Okay, so if you have a question, put it in the chat, and Audrey will bring it to my attention. So Monika has so much information in this book that you have to read it. And I'm just going to give you an example of one of the things that I didn't know about. Recently, this is from the book, scientists have documented a year-round population of monarchs in South Carolina. What can you share with us about the resident populations of monarchs in the United States? Those are the ones that don't migrate, and what that means for the future. Okay, so this is hot off the press for Monika to unmute herself and tell us about the resident monarch populations in the States.
Well, I'm not an expert on the resident populations, but I do know that in various parts of the United States where the climate is hospitable and milkweed's available, and the conditions are welcoming, monarch butterflies do continue to live year round. And we've had it here in San Antonio in certain years. I know in Florida they have it, and I know David James in California, talks about it, and apparently that new study documented in South Carolina. And I mean, one of the things that I came away from really believing strongly, having done all this research, and every single monarch scientist will agree with this, is that the monarch migration is going away, but monarchs will always be with us. And I think that nobody really wants to embrace that. It's a difficult truth. That spectacle, that phenomenon of nature is so spectacular and special that none of us want to let go of that. But when you talk to migration studies experts like Andy Davis or even Karen Oberhauser told me, migrations are ephemeral. Migrations serve a moment in time. And the reason that creatures migrate is because they have to. And with everything that's going on with climate change and with people making milkweed more available, monarchs are going to have everything they need locally in certain places at certain times of the year. And monarchs will be around. That's not a bad story. It's actually, monarchs will be around more because they won't just be here seasonally. They'll be here more often. In San Antonio, we have a certain kind of butterfly called a snout. I don't know if anybody knows the snout-nosed butterfly, but we have what we call snout breaks, where we just had one. We had a very wet August. This butterfly hosts on hackberry trees, and we had a very dry summer. Then we had a crazy rain, and all the hackberries put out fresh foliage. And a month later, we had thousands and thousands and thousands of snouts. And I think that that's what's going to happen with monarch butterflies, is that we're going to have seasonal appearances based on climate and conditions and a welcoming and hospitable environment in different pockets of the world.
Monika, this is not good news, Monika. This is terrible news. I live in Toronto, Canada, and and I want to see my monarchs and I want to tag them and I want them to go to Mexico. And if they just stay in the southern states, then I am not going to see them except when I go to visit my mother in Florida. So
It's going to be warmer in Canada, and maybe they'll be there more than they are now. They won't just be
and
there
what's
part
the
of the year.
time? What's the timing on this, Monica? Is this for my grandchildren or my great grandchildren?
I'm not a scientist. I'm just telling you, this is my theory. This is my theory that they will be. They will always be with us. They're not going away. They're not going extinct.
With us.
And and you're going to hear a lot about it because, as you know, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service will be ruling on the monarch population once again by the end of this year. In 2015, there's a petition by the Xerces Society and Lincoln Brower submitted to list the monarch as threatened under the Endangered Species Act. It was reviewed over 5 years. They were considered warranted but rejected because there were 160 something species in front of them in line. And they agreed that every 2 years they were going to reevaluate this. And so you're going to be hearing a lot about this again. And everybody that you talk to in scientific circles and people who are lobbying the U.S. Fish and Wildlife say that the reason that whole petition got submitted is because there's not a way to list a phenomenon. The migration is the thing that's at risk, not the monarch butterfly. The migration is for sure at risk, no doubt about it.
All right. Well, it's very hard for me to continue at this point. However,
well, Carol, I have a different take on that.
Okay, jump in.
Maybe from a larger perspective on evolution and a larger perspective on animal behavior. What I like about the fact that monarchs sometimes migrate and sometimes don't is that it shows that they have huge flexibility in their genome, to not use too scientific a word, but they can do either. They can migrate or they can stick around. And that's a good thing because a species that has different survival strategies is going to last better than a species that, remember in my book, I talk about the little blue butterfly that almost did die out because it needs this ant and it needs this and this has to happen and this has to happen. Well, the monarchs are the opposite. The monarchs are like the milkweed in that they're weeds. And monarchs are like weeds and they can go all over the place and they can take advantage of different kinds of systems. Whereas that little blue butterfly that I love so much and that was so amazing to write about has to stay within this one system. And, you know, if you think about this in terms of salmon, when the salmon leave a river and the story is they go out into the ocean, yada, yada, they do their thing, and then they come back 2 or 3 years later and go up the same river and spawn. Well, that's kind of a true story, except there's always a small residual group of salmon that swim down the river, go out into the ocean, and they're very lazy salmon. They just don't go anywhere. They stay right near the river where they came from. Some of them go way out into the ocean. I don't know. I use my hands when I talk about this. And some of them stay right there. So to me, that's nature hedging her bets.
Yeah.
So I don't know if these salmon go out in the ocean, maybe there's bad things out there that are going to destroy them. So I'll just have some shy salmon that are timid and are going to stay here. And so that group out there, the bald salmon, decides, you know, if they get destroyed, then we'll have this other seed group. And I think that's what's going to happen here. I think that's what is happening here, that we have, you know, monarch is not different. This is what I found interesting about monarchs. Individual monarchs can behave quite differently from each other. They're like us. Sometimes insects have to behave in almost rigid ways. Must do this, must do this, must do this. But monarchs are smarter and they're more creative. You know, when the story about David James taking me out into Eastern Washington State, the hottest place I'd ever been to in America, you know, and there's this little grove out there with a little bit of water, and there's monarchs that are there. So they're incredibly, incredibly flexible. And we had a nice monarch migration here. There's a story that we have that's in the book that Boston, about 100 years ago, Boston was all aghast because Boston was just covered with clouds of monarchs in the fall that were migrating all the way down to to the Mexican mountains. And they, Bostonians talked about the sky's dark from the what? We don't have that, It's nothing like that. So is it worse now than it was then? And why would it be like that? Well, it turned out that Boston and New England, all the trees were taken down so the farmers could farm. And then when the farming failed, they all went out to your neck of the woods to steal your land and try to farm out there. So the forests were cut down, the fields were abandoned, and guess what grew up in their place?
Milkweed.
Milkweed. So at one point in the history of New England, probably about at the end of the 1800s, the early 1900s, milkweed was all over the place. You could find milkweed anywhere, and the monarchs took advantage of it. So I don't worry. I don't want monarchs to disappear, but I'm just not. I think with the support that they're getting from people like you, I think they're going to be okay. I think they're going to be okay because they seem to be smart enough to find how did they find Boston? We were supposed to be covered in forests, but they found Boston.
So here's the scoop. We've got a lot of butterflies, and I've often wondered what makes monarchs so special, because it's big and it's beautiful, and the tiger swallowtail is also big and beautiful, maybe even bigger than the monarch, and for sure just as gorgeous. So what's the difference between the monarch and the tiger swallowtail?
Color.
The difference is its story. It's its story that this thing that weighs less than a paperclip flies 4,000 kilometers. So when we take away the migration, we take away the story, and what? We're going to have the tiger swallowtails our favorite. We love them all because they transform, and there's the symbol there, and for hundreds of other reasons. But I have a message for everybody on here. I want everybody to eat a little bit less meat. Okay, because it's the cows that are contributing to climate change, and I want it to be cold in Toronto. I like it cold, so do your bit to avoid climate change and eat a little less meat. Okay. Oh, Anna's a vegetarian. Here we go. Now, moving right along, I want to give you a sample, another sample of Wendy's poetry in her book. Is different styles of writing. And this is how Wendy writes in her epilogue. Okay, it's the end of the book, and she says this. When I went to the mountains of Mexico as the final step in researching this book, I did not expect a otherworldly experience. I'd seen a lot of butterflies over the past 2 years, including a great many monarchs. I did not expect to be yet again spellbound by sunlight and color, but I was. The experience was poignant. In the bright mountain sunlight, the same bedazzlement that overwhelmed me, it took hold of me once more as I trudged slowly up the steep, high-altitude climb to the mountain peaks of El Rosario. In the biosphere, the clouds shifted and the forest was filled with energy and sunlight. So many of us have had this overwhelming experience in Mexico. I've had it 3 times. I've been with 2 different groups, and I was very lucky my first time to have Debbie Jackson, who is on this call, take me and personally show me and a group of people all the best spots. Since then, I've had 2 other experiences, including the last one, which was by far the most moving. Now, I have asked a tour operator to come and talk to you a little bit about Mexico, and you can ask questions in case you too would like to have the same experience that Monika, Wendy, and I, Debbie, who goes every year, and others have had. So I am going to call upon Sid and Chris to unmute and tell us something about the trips to Mexico that you offer.
Thank you, Carol. Yeah, I'm Chris. I'm sitting here with Sid. Hello. Yeah, we're the owners of Explore Latin America, and we've been going to the overwintering sites for over 15 years now. And yes, we offer Monarch Butterfly tours It's an 8-day itinerary. We go to 3 different sanctuaries. I think it's quite unique on the market. And we handpick our hotels. We guide you personally, so you're going to travel with us. We add a lot of information about culture, nature, obviously, food, customs, and its people, Mexican people. So you get a better understanding of Mexico. So it is Mexico. So you travel with a local. And yeah, talking about Mexico, we know that people are sometimes hesitant to come. We have been taking people for years. We have not had any issues. We have not have heard of any issues, and either from our colleagues. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out via Carol. She can always redirect you to us. And our website, I think it's in the link. And yeah, we're here to make your dream happen. No?
So you've got 3 trips in February that you still have vacancies on?
Yeah, there are different, like sometimes more, sometimes less spots. It's all on our website. But at this moment, we still have spots on all 3 departures. The first one is on the 15th of February, and then the 2 following Saturdays.
So when you travel with these 2, you leave your brains at home. They pick you up at the airport no matter when you show up there. You don't need to change any money at home. They take you to a bank machine and you get all your money. And if you run out of money, Sid is the bank. Like, they've anticipated absolutely everything. You don't ever have to find an ATM because Sid has money and we'll change it for you. And everything else. The hotels are the best. And it's the least expensive of all the tours. Okay, enough about these guys. If you have questions, go to their website. Unless somebody has a pressing question now, unmute yourself and ask it.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you.
Love to travel with you. Does anybody else have any announcements about upcoming events that they would like us to go to? Because we all do networking here. Did anybody come in late and have a book that they would like to talk about? Well, then, I will ask our...
Carol, I do have something I was just thinking about when you were talking about people going to see the butterflies. I had spent a year traveling around, meeting people, interviewing scientists, reading books. And I was, in the end, I had a very difficult family situation. One of my family members was very ill, and she had just died. And so I was exhausted because I'm on the Cape, she's in Ohio. I was driving back and forth constantly. I was exhausted. And I thought, I don't know, maybe I don't really need to go. I've seen butterflies here. The butterfly things in California are amazing. I thought maybe I don't really need to do it. Maybe I should just sit home and feel sad. And my editor said, no, I really think you should go. You really should go. So my husband and I decided to go, and I wasn't feeling really excited about it because I was upset. I'm so glad I went. It was, I travel around the world to see beautiful wildlife things. This was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. We were slowly walking up the hill, which turned out to be a very steep hill, very tall. And someone said, well, why don't you ride a horse? I said, no, I'll walk up. And I rode a horse back down. And I said, no, I really want to walk up. So everyone, we had a wonderful guide, a wonderful Mexican guy. He was so nice to me because I'd walk up and then he'd say, I don't know, maybe I can't go any further. Maybe I can't go. He said, don't worry. He was always calling me Miss Wendy. So don't worry, Miss Wendy. If you feel like taking a few more steps, we'll take a few more steps. If you don't, that's okay. But being me, I finally did get up to the top of the mountain, frustrated. People so much older than me were passing me. I did not like that. And while I was walking up, it was just, the sun was just coming out. You walk up by a stream where there's, water flowing down. And these streams of butterflies come down and fly all around you. And they flutter around you. They sometimes stop on your shoulders. We talked about that, or they'll rest on bushes or something like that. It was, I hate to be so lazy and use the word awesome, but it was awesome. It really was. And I hope anybody who hasn't gone, really, I hope they go. This looks like a lovely couple, and I'm sure they'll take you on an amazing trip. I'd love to go to three different sites. We only had time to go to one, but three different sites would be really fantastic. And we were a little hesitant. I don't speak Spanish. But, and we had to go when we had time to go. My husband came with me. So we went down on our own. We stayed in a hotel. We had this lovely guide who picked us up and took us up there. And I thought, oh, what is this going to be like? It was great. The place that we went to was El Rosario, and they even had brand new bathrooms. I mean, everything.
Now
I've traveled a lot through Africa. Believe me, this can be an important issue, and it was just so well, it was just, I don't want to say catered to American tourists, but if you're an American tourist, you'll be happy there. You'll be and everybody is standing there selling all these wonderful butterfly things. If you care about butterflies, turn off this computer and go down there now, because they're coming back right now, aren't they?
Neither I nor Wendy was paid for this ad.
Well, no, I wasn't, but that's what I'm saying to you. I didn't want to go. I felt lazy. I was very sad of what I'd been through with my poor cousin and all of that stuff. And my husband said, come on, we're going to go anyway. And I'm just thrilled that, I mean, what if I hadn't gone? What if I'd been lazy and feeling sorry for myself and I hadn't gone to see this marvelous spectacle? Everybody needs to go. Go now. And I don't even know these people. I'm just telling you, call them up and go with them.
And of course, you can message me, and I can tell you more because I've been there. So, Monika, Wendy, and Monika, you're going to have the last word because we have 4 minutes before they cut me off. And when Monika, I want to know what you're up to next.
Well, I actually I have another book coming out in May of next year. It's called Plants with Purpose. And not surprisingly, having done all the research for the Monarch book led me down this trail of, embracing more and more native and well-adapted plants. And so the book, Plants with Purpose, is basically 25 profiles of plants that multitask in hot climates. And I kind of lay out the metaphor of what Doug Tallamy and others have proposed, is that you need to think of your yard, you need to think of gardening like cooking. And like in my case, in the book, I say, think of your yard like you're having a dinner party. And if you're going to have a dinner party and you're going to shop for, plan, prepare, cook, clean up, and have these people in your home for several hours, planning and all of that, would you only want people at the table that were beautiful? Because for so many decades, the main criteria for people choosing plants for their yard is beauty, beauty, beauty. And I see that shifting now, and I think that's a wonderful thing. But we all need to be thinking about plants that have more than the purpose of beauty to entertain us and make it look good. And so the book looks at plants that have to do at least 3 things besides look good. They have to serve the ecosystem. They can be a pollinator plant. They can be a wildlife plant. They can be a plant for for seeds for birds. They can have an interesting story to tell. And so all the plants featured have at least 3 things besides beauty. And then I'm also working on a book called The Recovering Beekeeper, because I was a beekeeper for a while and I quit. And I'm going to tell that story at some point. So that's what's next.
Okay, then I just realized we have another author. And that's Kylie. And Kylie, why don't you unmute, show us your book. And for those who don't know it already, there's my book. Well, you can't see it. This is for beginners, how to raise monarch butterflies. Well, you all know it, if I couldn't get the background off. It's for beginners. The next level after my book, when you've read enough of my book, is to read Kylie's book, Saving the Monarch Butterfly. And Kylie, you've got 30 seconds to tell us why this is the next level book. I've read it and it's fabulous. So many factoids, you're going to love it.
Carol. Can everybody hear me?
Just barely, Kylie.
I'll just try to get a little bit closer here. I'm having issues. Well, the reason I wrote my book was because when I was trying to teach myself things and learn more about the monarch, I was having to go to this book, different sources. And I thought, why isn't there just one source that has all of these things that I've been finding? Why isn't there one that has it all in one place, very comprehensive? So that was my goal when I started to write it. And I have met Dr. Lincoln Brower. I've been in his home, and he said that was the one thing that he was really surprised with my book. He endorsed it, and which I cried when he did that, but he just said I was so surprised at how comprehensive it was. And
And
so,
on that note, I'm afraid I'm going to have to cut you off.
sorry.
Kylie, good job. So there's my book for beginners, then Kylie's book, okay? And it's very readable. And then the next level after that is Wendy's and Monika, when you really want to know the deep dive stories of everything. So for every level, there's a Christmas present here. There's a Christmas present. So I'm going to say goodbye to everybody, only
Thank you,
because
Carol.
I think everybody's going to get kicked out in 35 seconds. If we're not all kicked out, then we're going to continue to just like chat. But just in case, I'm going to say goodbye and turn off the recording.
Thank you for all, Carol. Very
Oh,
interesting.
Stella! I got 18 seconds to talk to Estella?
Here all the time, but it has been great to see you and hear you all. Welcome to Mexico, everyone coming. It will be a pleasure to have you here next time.
If you go to Mexico
Hi,
and you're
Estella.
lucky enough to meet Estella.
Looking forward to seeing you all again here.
Okay, we're still here. Keep talking, Carol.
Oh, yeah.
We're down to zero time.
Go ahead.
Is
That's
everybody
okay,
still
then.
here? We're down to 0
We're
time.
here.
It's
You're
not
looking good, Estella.
it's not knocking us out.
No, it's
So
all good.
I'm going to stop the recording anyway, because now we're at the very